Okay, let's unpack this. Just start for a second and think about how much air you are breathing right now, every minute, every hour, every single day.
Mhm.
We focus so much on what we eat and drink, maybe, but the sheer volume of air we take in,
Mm.
it just dwarfs food and water. It's like this invisible guest that's always with us everywhere.
And that intimate, constant connection. That's precisely why what's in that air is so incredibly important. So today we're taking a deep dive into air pollution, what it is, where this invisible gas comes from,
Right.
and its profound, often hidden impact on our health and, well, the world around us.
And we've pulled together quite a stack of sources for this research articles, expert analyses, some historical accounts too, to really try and get to the core of this complex issue.
Yeah, our mission really is to distill the most important nuggets of knowledge from all that material, give you a clear, actionable understanding of this pervasive threat and what it means for you directly.
And when you actually quantify how much air we breathe, it really hits home why this matters so much, doesn't it?
It really does. The numbers are quite stark. An average adult needs around 15 kilograms of air every single day.
15 kilograms.
Yeah. Now compare that to, say, the amount of water we might drink, maybe 1.5 kilograms, or food, perhaps 0.75 kilograms. You are breathing in 10 to 20 times the weight of air compared to everything else you consume combined.
That volume is just, it's absolutely critical because just like anything else, the impact of a pollutant is all about the dose, right?
Exactly. It's a combination of two things: the concentration of the pollutant in the air and how long you're exposed to it. And because you breathe such a massive quantity of air constantly, without stopping,
Right.
even very low concentrations of harmful substances can accumulate. They build up into a significant dose over time.
Mm.
Air just has this incredible nonstop opportunity to interact with your body.
So, okay, where does this stuff actually come from? What are the main sources of this invisible contamination?
Well, a small percentage is natural. Think volcano eruptions sending ash way up into the atmosphere,
Yeah.
or dust storms kicking up fine particles, natural allergens like pollen, and even wildfires. Although, it's crucial to point out that human-caused climate change is unfortunately making wildfires more frequent and intense. So it kind of blurs the lines between natural and human-driven sources.
That's a good point.
But the truly natural ones, those are things we can't really control.
But the vast majority of air pollution, that's on us.
Predominantly, yes.
Huh.
Human activities are the biggest culprits by far. A major source is burning fossil fuels. That's your oil, coal, natural gas.
The decomposed plants and organisms.
Exactly, from millions of years ago. Burning these releases carbon dioxide, which is a big greenhouse gas, contributing to global warming, sure. But it also releases a whole cocktail of other harmful pollutants that intensify smog and directly impact health.
And our daily commute, driving around, that's a big part of the problem too.
Oh, absolutely. Road transport, cars, trucks, vehicles is often cited as the single biggest contributor to air pollution, particularly in urban areas. Then you have toxic smoke from factories and industrial processes. And even things like smoking cigarettes directly release harmful compounds into the air, affecting both the smoker and, everyone around them.
And wildfires, you mentioned them earlier, they seem like a growing issue, especially lately.
They really are. As wildfires become more common and severe, their smoke is a major, major component of poor air quality events. And it's not just burnt wood you see. It contains this complex mix of hazardous gases and fine particles,
Okay.
but also toxins picked up from burning buildings, cars, chemicals, whatever's in its path. And weather patterns are incredibly efficient at carrying this smoke. We've seen smoke plumes travel across entire continents,
Yeah.
affecting air quality thousands of miles away from the fire itself.
It really drives home that this isn't just some local problem near a factory. It can literally be pollution from somewhere else arriving right at your doorstep. And the World Health Organization has framed this in pretty dramatic terms, haven't they?
They certainly have. The WHO calls air pollution a silent public health emergency. And what's particularly striking, I think, is their comparison of it to the new tobacco.
The new tobacco.
Wow.
Yeah.
While smoking rates have thankfully declined in many places, exposure to polluted air is now just incredibly widespread. It's almost unavoidable for large parts of the global population. It's harming us, often without us even realizing it, much like passive smoking, but, on this massive global scale.
That idea of a silent killer feels very apt here. Carbon monoxide, for example, comes to mind.
Carbon monoxide, or CI, is
Yeah.
a prime example of that silent threat because it is completely colorless, odorless, and tasteless. You have absolutely no sensory warning that you're inhaling it,
None at all.
which is what makes it so dangerous. It's a common product of incomplete combustion, the vehicle exhaust, faulty furnaces, maybe generators running indoors where they shouldn't be.
So, okay, once these pollutants are floating around out there, how do they actually get inside us and start doing damage?
Well, the primary way is through those tiny, often invisible particles suspended in the air, what we call particulate matter, or PM.
Right,
Your
PRN.
body has natural defenses, like the hairs in your nose or mucus in your airways, but many of these particles are just so small they can slip right past those initial barriers and go deep into your lungs.
And then what happens once they're in there?
Well, once they're there, your immune system recognizes them as foreign invaders. It tries to fight back, and that triggers inflammation.
Okay.
But the particles can penetrate even deeper into the lung tissue itself, sometimes lodging toxic compounds that are carried on their surface, things like heavy metals, carcinogens, things that can really lay the groundwork for long-term disease, like cancer.
But it doesn't just stop in the lungs, does it? I remember reading that.
Crucially, no. The very smallest particles can actually cross the delicate barrier between the air sacs in your lungs and your bloodstream. And once they're in your blood, they can travel basically anywhere in your body. They can reach organs and systems you wouldn't necessarily think are connected to just breathing air.
So the actual size of these particles is a really big deal then.
It's absolutely key. It determines how deep they penetrate and what parts of your body they can ultimately affect. Think of PM10 as larger particles. They're less hazardous generally, often trapped higher up in your respiratory system.
Okay.
But PM2.5 particles, that's 2.5 micrometers or less in diameter, they're small enough to reach deep into the gas exchange regions of your lungs. PM1 is even smaller, getting into more parts of the lung.
And then there are even smaller ones.
Yes, the smallest, the PM0.1 or ultrafine particles. These are the ones tiny enough to potentially cross right into blood cells and maybe even travel up the olfactory nerve directly into the brain.
Into the brain, that's scary.
It is. And what makes them even more insidious is that toxic substances, anything from heavy metals like lead or cadmium to complex organic compounds like PAHs or dioxins, can basically stick to the surface of these particles. They hitch a ride deep into your system.
Wow. Okay, that explains why the health impacts seem to be so incredibly widespread. Let's maybe walk through some of the major ways this invisible guest affects our bodies, starting with the most obvious one, the respiratory system.
Makes sense. Naturally, the lungs and airways are on the front line. We see a whole range of effects from, simple irritation like coughing, wheezing, maybe difficulty breathing, throat infections, to more serious conditions like pneumonia, especially in children, and both acute and chronic bronchitis. Over long periods, pollutants can actually cause scarring or damage to lung fibers like silicosis if you're exposed to silica dust, and they can impair the ability of your lungs to transfer oxygen into your blood.
And what are the main culprits there?
Key gaseous pollutants here include sulfur dioxide, SO2, and nitrogen oxides, NOx, which often come from burning fuels. Ground-level ozone is another big one that's formed when other pollutants react in sunlight, and of course, fine particulate matter and smoke particles themselves.
Okay, so that's the breathing part. But you mentioned particles getting into the bloodstream. What does that mean for, say, the cardiovascular system, our heart and blood vessels?
Yeah, this is where air pollution becomes a major driver of heart disease and strokes. Those tiny particles circulating in the bloodstream can cause inflammation in the blood vessel.
Inflammation, okay.
Yes, leading them to constrict, which increases blood pressure. They can also destabilize or dislodge fatty plaque that might have built up in arteries over time, and they can contribute to the formation of blood clots.
And those clots are dangerous.
Extremely. They can block blood flow, leading directly to heart attacks or strokes. It's a very direct link between the air you breathe and the health of your heart and your entire circulation.
And you mentioned carbon monoxide earlier, the silent killer. It has that very specific effect on the blood too, right?
Yes, exactly. That CO molecule has an extremely strong affinity for hemoglobin. That's the molecule in your red blood cells that carries oxygen.
Okay.
CO binds to hemoglobin about 200 times more strongly than oxygen does.
200 times.
Yes. So it effectively hijacks the oxygen carriers in your blood. It drastically reduces your blood's capacity to deliver vital oxygen to your organs and tissues, especially your brain and heart.
So what does that feel like?
Well, even at moderate concentrations, this leads to symptoms like nausea, headache, fatigue. At higher levels, it can be rapidly fatal because your body is simply starved of oxygen. So CO, along with SO2, NOx, ozone, and PM, are all major threats to your heart and blood.
It's just incredible that breathing something can affect your blood's basic ability to carry oxygen. What about the brain and the nervous system? You mentioned particles potentially getting there.
Yes, this is an area of growing concern, particularly regarding those ultrafine particles, the PM0.1s. At a general level, air pollution exposure can cause things like headaches, dizziness, and fatigue.
Okay.
But certain pollutants, like lead, are well-known neurotoxins. They're especially damaging to the developing brains in children, potentially causing intellectual disability and affecting learning ability long-term.
And mercury.
Mercury exposure can cause vision and hearing problems. As I said, those very small PM0.1 particles are being actively investigated for potential links to neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's and cognitive delays later in life.
Wow.
We've also seen severe neurological syndromes linked to specific pollutants in the past, famously Minamata disease from mercury poisoning in Japan, and possibly others connected to things like dioxins or certain volatile organic compounds, VOCs.
So it's not just lungs and heart, it's potentially your cognitive function, your long-term brain health too. Are there other systems affected? It seems like it touches everything.
Unfortunately, yes, the reach is quite broad according to the sources we looked at. Your skin, eyes, nose, and throat are often the first points of contact.
Right, irritations. Right.
Exactly. Irritation, itching, sneezing, or runny nose. That can come from pollutants like SO2, NOx, ozone, smoke, dust, or complex organic compounds like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, and dioxins.
What?
Then the liver and kidneys, which are your body's main detoxification organs, they can also be damaged by heavy metals like cadmium or those organic compounds like PAH, ozone, and NOx.
Even liver and kidneys.
There's even a link to skeletal and joint issues. Severe pain in bones and joints has been linked specifically to cadmium exposure, known tragically as itai disease.
Oh my goodness.
Reproductive health can also be impacted. There are concerns about effects on fetuses during pregnancy, particularly linked to lead exposure, but also potentially general air pollution, ozone, and PM.
And cancer. That's often mentioned.
Yes, critically, many components of air pollution are carcinogenic. The toxic substances carried on particulate matter and specific chemicals, like certain VOCs, think benzene and toluene and PAHs, are known to increase the risk of various cancers.
That's a truly comprehensive list of how it affects basically our entire bodies. Who is most vulnerable to these impacts? Are some people more susceptible than others?
Definitely. Certain groups are at significantly higher risk. Children, for one. Their respiratory systems and immune systems are still developing, and they actually breathe faster relative to their body size, taking in more air per pound.
Okay, makes sense.
And they are particularly vulnerable to things like lead's effect on development.
Yeah.
Then you have older adults and people with pre-existing health conditions, especially heart or lung problems like asthma, COPD, or heart failure.
Yeah.
They're much more sensitive.
Any others?
Pregnant people are also considered a vulnerable group. And then you have people whose jobs or location lead to higher exposure. Think outdoor workers or people living right next to busy roads or industrial areas. And we shouldn't forget indoor air quality either. That can be a major risk factor, for instance, from cooking with solid fuels or just having poor ventilation, which is a big issue in certain parts of the world.
And history offers some pretty grim examples of just how bad air pollution can get, doesn't it?
Oh, it does. These major incidents really served as stark warnings. The Great Smog of London in 1952 is probably the most infamous example.
Right.
Caused by this perfect storm of cold weather, no wind, and massive amounts of coal burning for heating and industry. The dense fog trapped extremely high concentrations of sulfur dioxide and particulate matter.
And the result?
A sharp, sudden increase in respiratory problems and deaths. Sources from back then estimate figures somewhere between 4,000 and maybe even 8,000 excess deaths in the weeks and months that followed.
That's staggering.
It is. And another severe episode happened in New York City in 1963, also linked to high SO2 concentrations, also resulting in significant fatalities. These events really hammered home the acute, deadly potential of severe air pollution.
So, okay, given this understanding of what it is, where it comes from, how it harms us, what can we actually do? Both, to reduce the pollution itself and maybe protect ourselves.
Well, addressing the problem fundamentally requires action at the source. A key step, I think, is just spreading awareness about the consequences, especially of burning fossil fuels for energy and transport.
Getting the word out.
Exactly. On a larger scale, this means working hard to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels wherever possible.
Yeah.
But even individual small steps can add up. like being more energy efficient at home, switching off lights and electronics when you don't need them.
How does that help?
It contributes by reducing the overall energy demand, which in many places still relies heavily on fossil fuel power plants.
Ah, okay. And personal transport. That seems like a big one we interact with daily.
It really is. Limiting the use of private cars whenever you can is crucial. Opting for public transport, walking, or cycling. Those are direct ways to reduce emissions right there. And promoting more efficient engines in vehicles and really accelerating the shift towards electric vehicles, ideally powered by cleaner energy sources. Those are also vital strategies to clean up the air from transportation.
Okay, that's reducing the source. What about protecting ourselves, especially on days when air quality is already bad or, when there's smoke from wildfires blowing through?
Yeah, knowledge is power here. First step. Stay informed. Check the air quality in your area. Use resources like airnow.gov if you're in the U.S. or similar local services.
Check the forecast,
Yeah,
basically.
exactly. On those poor air quality days, the most effective immediate protection is usually to stay indoors as much as possible. Close your windows, close your doors,
Yeah.
and make sure your HVAC system isn't actively pulling in polluted outside air. You might need to find and close the outdoor air intake vents if your system has them.
What about air purifiers? Are they helpful indoors?
Yes, a good quality air purifier with a HEPA filter can significantly reduce indoor particle levels.
Right.
That's a good strategy. Just be really sure to choose one that doesn't generate ozone. Some older or cheaper models might, and ozone itself is a harmful lung irritant.
Good tip.
And understanding your home's HVAC system is also important. Use high-efficiency filters if you can, and know how to set it to recirculate the indoor air rather than bringing in polluted outdoor air on those bad days.
And we can actually pollute our own indoor air too, right? We need to be careful about that.
Absolutely. Avoid creating unnecessary indoor pollution. That means strictly no smoking indoors, ever. Minimize activities that stir up dust and particles, like extensive vacuuming, unless your vacuum has a really good HEPA filter.
Okay.
And be mindful of burning things, candles, incense. Even using gas stoves for frying without really good ventilation can significantly raise indoor pollutant levels.
So maybe make a safe space.
Yeah, creating a designated clean room in your home can be a good idea, especially if you don't have central air conditioning that filters the whole house. It can provide a safer refuge during severe pollution events, like heavy wildfire smoke.
And if you simply have to go outside on one of those days?
Try to minimize your time outside and definitely avoid strenuous activity that makes you breathe harder and faster, pulling more pollutants deep into your lungs.
Okay.
If you absolutely must be outdoors when air quality is poor, seriously consider wearing a well-fitted mask designed to filter out particles. Something like an N95, a KN95, or even a P100 respirator can be effective, but the fit is really key.
That matters most.
It really does. And importantly, if you have any chronic health conditions, asthma, COPD, heart problems, talk to your doctor before bad air quality hits. Make a plan. Know how it might affect you and what symptoms should prompt you to seek medical attention right away. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've really, I think, explored the profound importance of the air we breathe. Understanding that its sheer volume makes us uniquely vulnerable to contamination. We've traced air pollution back to its primary sources, from the natural world, yes, but also the really significant impact of human activity. We've seen how these tiny, invisible particles can bypass our defenses, enter our bloodstream, and wage this sort of quiet war on virtually every system in our body.
Yeah.
Lungs, heart, brain, even bones. We've recognized who among us is most at risk and taken some, frankly, sobering lessons from historical pollution disasters. And then finally, looked at tangible steps, both big and small, to try and clean up the air and protect ourselves.
The undeniable takeaway for me is this. The air you breathe isn't just empty space. It's this vital, constantly moving medium that connects you intimately to the world and impacts your health every second of every day. Understanding what's actually in it is just fundamental to your well-being and, well, the health of the planet we all share.
Absolutely. And maybe to leave you with a final thought, let's reflect on Carl Sagan's famous words about our place in the cosmos and our responsibility to Earth. As he said, when describing our planet from afar, like it or not, for the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand. So it's important to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known.
So think about what preserving and cherishing that pale blue dot truly means for this vital, invisible blanket of air that surrounds it, that sustains all life upon it, and ultimately connects every single one of us.